He was reportedly like making car sounds during the investigation. So the transcript reads like it'll say something and then it says in parentheses makes car sound, end of parentheses. And then another point it was like in parentheses it would say laughter like as his response.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey everybody, happy Friday. So hopefully you guys caught our Wednesday podcast because we had an awesome guest on, but we focused primarily on the border on Wednesday. So we haven't caught you guys up on what's been happening in the basically ever ridiculous world of our geriatric senile president since his disturbing State of the Union speech on Friday. So we have a lot to cover today. But before we dive in, Stephanie, I have to ask, have you seen Biden's latest re-election campaign commercial? Because it's
No,
fucking cringe.
you have to send it to me. I didn't find it.
Oh my God, I totally will. But this man, like, literally must be getting the widest variety of drugs because first he has his, hate-fueled hour-long dark Brandon rant on Friday. And now this new campaign ad makes it look like they've given him some kind of happy relaxation tonic so he can be everyone's favorite Grandpa Joe instead of like the crazy combative old man. Maybe they got him stoned. I don't know. But the commercial is called, quote, For You. And the whole thing is like him smiling and he's trying to act fun and playful while he tells America about all of the wonderful things he's done for us that Trump couldn't do. And so I want to play a clip of this absolutely ridiculous commercial.
Look, I'm not a young guy. That's no secret. But here's the deal. I understand how to get things done for the American people. I led the country through the COVID crisis. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world. I passed a law that lowers prescription drug prices, caps us at $35 a month for seniors. For 4 years, Donald Trump tried to pass an infrastructure law, and he failed. I got it done. Now we're rebuilding America. I passed the biggest law in history to combat climate change because our future depends on it. Donald Trump took away the freedom of women to choose. I'm determined to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again. Donald Trump believes the job of the president is to take care of Donald Trump. I believe the job of the president is to fight for you, the American people. And that's what I'm doing. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message. Can we do one more take? Look, I'm very young, energetic, and handsome. What the hell am I doing this for?
Oh my God. They're trying to like play off his like mental decline and it's not working. And I'm sorry, but whenever he does that whisper, like, here's the deal, like I just cringe. I'm like, this guy's so creepy.
It's beyond creepy. And it's like he's just the whole time got this smile on his face, and they have him in like, the little V-neck sweater with his collared shirt and just making him look so nice. And I'm just so sick of all the lies. It's just lies upon lies upon lies. And speaking of lies, a few weeks ago, we talked about the release of Special Counsel Robert Hur's report in the whole Biden classified documents investigation. And so this past Tuesday, he testified before the House Judiciary Committee. And now the whole thing has become like even more of a shit show than the report initially indicated, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. And I saw more this morning that I could like talk forever about this thing. But for anyone that isn't familiar with the investigation, Hur was the investigator that looked into Biden's mishandling of classified documents and ended up like publishing his report that was recommending that he's not like criminally charged because he said a jury would see Biden as this sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. And so like that started this whole political firestorm because you had Republicans highlighting the double standard of justice, and they were comparing like Trump's treatment with the classified documents versus Biden. And then the left has just gone like totally crazy over the report because it flat out like says that Biden has a cognitive decline and lapse in memory. And so they were just like completely crazed over this. They kept pointing out the part of the report where the investigator talked about Biden forgetting the year that his son died. And Biden himself like tried to make this better, but made it worse by like yelling at reporters and saying that it was none of his damn business when his son died. So anyhow, the transcripts from this whole investigation were released right before the congressional hearing. And it turns out that Biden was the one that brought up his son, Beau, during the interview. And it also highlighted multiple instances where Biden had a total lapse of memory trying to answer like basic questions. So.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this, but I was reading in the Washington Post that the transcripts basically show he was like cracking jokes throughout the whole investigation. And he told federal prosecutors stuff like they probably knew the layout of his house better than he did because they've spent so much time inside. And he hoped they didn't find risque pictures of his wife in a bathing suit. And then when he was asked about the boxes of classified documents that were found in the garage near his Corvette, he was reportedly like making car sounds during the investigation. So the transcript reads like it'll say something and then it says in parentheses makes car sound, end of parentheses. And then another point it was like in parentheses it would say laughter like as his response.
He is such a weirdo. Jesse Waters did like a thing on this and he was like, vroom, 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 vroom. And he's like making that noise and I was just dying laughing. I'm like, that is totally something Biden would do. And you know what it reminds me of? Like an episode of The Office with Michael Scott, who's like, you know, supposed to be the man in charge, yet he's constantly like making an ass of himself. And it's sad because this is like really the man that's leading our country. Or is he? So, okay, I got to bring this up real quick. I'm not going to get us too sidetracked, but something really interesting was pointed out about the State of the Union speech. So, you know how like people are always saying that Obama is secretly the one running things and like he's probably in his basement in his sweatpants, like on a, you know, walkie-talkie, like telling Biden what to say? Well, during the State of the Union speech, there was a point where Biden said that he taught the Second Amendment for 12 years. So there were all these people on TikTok that were like, that's a lie. Like, no, he didn't. Where is this coming from? Well, true, he did not. But you know who did teach constitutional law for 12 years? Obama. Like, is that not crazy? So it's like, people are always joking about that, but it's like, holy shit, like maybe he is like talking in some earpiece to Biden because like, what are the odds that he says something that would be something that Biden would or Obama would say?
Well, we know he can't read a teleprompter correctly, so an earpiece would be the way to go.
That would be good. Yeah, so anyhow, back to the hearing. Another important fact that I didn't know about this prior to the hearing was that Biden's ghostwriter for his book deleted recorded conversations with Biden about the classified documents. And so Congressman Matt Gaetz pointed this out and said how this is a clear obstruction of justice. And Hur replied that, well, the ghostwriter did keep the transcripts of the conversations. And Gaetz was like, well, if you delete half of the evidence, it's still obstruction, and the ghostwriter should have been charged. And then he also noted, you know, that Biden and Trump should have been treated equally in their handling of the classified documents. And I mean, clearly there was a double standard. So I want to play a clip from the hearing, and this is a clip of Congressman Armstrong, because I thought he did a great job of summarizing all these points and kind of like laying out the facts. So listen to this.
How could anyone be that irresponsible? And I thought, what data was in there that could compromise sources, methods, and it's just totally irresponsible? As President Biden's statement about Donald Trump and the classified documents. Mr. Hur, classified documents were found at the Penn Biden Center?
That's correct.
They were found in President Biden's garage?
In Wilmington, Delaware, yes.
And in his basement den?
Also in the same home, yes.
And his main floor office?
Correct.
And his third floor den?
Correct.
At the University of Delaware?
Correct.
And at the Biden Institute?
Correct.
All right. And the elements of the crime for this, I mean, we get into all of this, but the elements of the crime are pretty simple, right? President Biden had unauthorized possession of a document, writing, or note. That's correct.
Correct.
And that the document, writing, or note related to national defense.
Correct.
And that the defendant, and we may talk about the willfully part here in a second, retained the document, writing, or note and failed to deliver it to an employee or officer entitled to receive it.
Correct. There is a willfulness intent element, as you say.
But those are the elements of the crime.
Including the intent element, yes.
And there are at least two different quotes, right? Where he told his ghostwriter, and this is in your report, in a matter of fact, and this is February 16, 2017, that he had just found all this classified stuff downstairs.
He did make that statement that was captured on an audio recording.
And on April 10th, 2017, Biden read aloud a classified passage related to a 2015 meeting in the Situation Room.
That is in the report, yes.
And these are national security documents. Afghanistan, I mean, has been mentioned a whole bunch of those things, right?
Correct.
And at one point in time, his personal attorneys and the DOJ attorneys argued about notes, taking all of the different things and compared it to Reagan.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Congressman?
President Biden's attorneys, personal attorneys, talked about the notes and why they didn't actually account for the Presidential Records Act. But you found that argument in your report. It seems a little persuasive, but you eventually said, no, the executive order trumps, right?
We did set forth an analysis of the governing law and ultimately concluded that the executive order 13526 does apply and did govern former Vice President Biden at the time.
So you have audio recording from his ghostwriter where the president acknowledges that the information he has is classified and he's sharing with his ghostwriter.
We have an audio recording capturing a statement from Mr. Biden saying to his ghostwriter in February of 2017, quote, "I just found all the classified stuff downstairs," end quote.
And then again, reciting passages from a meeting in the Situation.
Yes.
And those are in President Biden's own words.
Correct.
Right. So and the ghostwriter has no classified, he has no clearance, no classified clearance to anything, correct?
That is our understanding, that Mr. Zwanitzer was not authorized to receive classified information.
Okay, so the elements are possessed documents, the documents related to national defense, and willfully retained those documents, and in this case, shared them with somebody who was not allowed to receive them.
There are different subsections of 18 U.S.C. 793. One subsection relates to the willful retention, and another relates to disclosure of national defense information.
Well, I mean, the willful retention, we've got the Penn Biden Center, the garage, the basement den, the main floor office, the third floor den, the University of Delaware, and the Biden Institute. We have 50-year career of a person who has not been very great at dealing with classified documents throughout, even prior to his time as vice president, when he was in the U.S. Senate, right?
We do address each set of those documents in the report, Congressman.
So the difference, but I think this is really important because the difference is, it appears just from reading the report, he has been, we heard all about exonerated and all those different things. It appears from the report, he met every actual element of the crime. So I want to talk about the department principles on federal prosecution, because that actually has nothing to do with the underlying elements, correct? It's whether or not you can prove this at trial.
Under the department's justice manual and the principles of federal prosecution, a prosecutor has to assess the evidence and determine whether, in his or her judgment, the probable outcome will be a conviction at trial.
So whether or not you meet the elements of the crime, which I think it's clear that he does, the second part of this is this, and that's where it gets into the sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. You could have just said, we don't prosecute sitting presidents, but you did not. And you enter this, but that doesn't have anything to do with the actual elements of the crime. That has to do with getting a conviction at trial, correct?
Well, Congressman, part and parcel of a prosecutor's judgment as to whether or not a conviction is the probable outcome of trial is assessing how the evidence identified during the investigation lines up with the elements and what proof can be offered to a jury during a trial.
Okay, I know that was a long clip, but I feel like it laid out exactly what the crime was and that he met all the elements of the crime. We heard it like 3 different times. And then it also shows like just how different this is from Trump's. Trump, they determined, held mementos. He was holding national security documents, like high clearance national security documents, obviously all over the place. So Republicans like stuck with that Biden met every standard of the crime. And the fact that he's not being charged shows the double standard of justice, since Trump was charged, blah, blah, blah. The Democrats brought up that Mr. Hur, being a registered Republican and, making claims about Biden's cognitive decline, was simply him trying to get Trump reelected. So it's like, that's what they're saying. And then this morning I saw a clip of Rashida Tlaib, our favorite person, and she was like, yeah, Mr. Hur, your report, completely exonerated Trump. And he cut her off and he was like, it absolutely did not exonerate him. Where do you see that word? Can you tell me what specific page? Because I know my report did not exonerate him at all. And she was like,
Biden, right?
reclaiming my time, no further questions, and cuts him off before he could keep answering the question that he did not exonerate Biden.
Okay.
Oh, did I say Trump?
You said Trump, so I was like, wait a minute.
Sorry.
For Biden.
I'm like looking at Trump's name on my notes. No, Biden. Whoops. So, okay, here, like after listening to that, this is my opinion for what it's worth. I think that Hur either knew or was flat out told by his superiors at the DOJ that they are not going to prosecute Biden. So like he didn't even have that as an option. That's my opinion. And so I think that he made mention of Biden's cognitive decline, knowing that Biden would have to answer for that, especially in an election year, because as Armstrong was just saying in that clip, you could have just said we don't prosecute sitting presidents, but he didn't. So that's what I think. I think his hands were tied and he did something that he wasn't supposed to do because it was the only thing he could do. And, he testified in this hearing that the White House wanted to edit the report before it was publicly released and make changes specifically to the part where it said that Biden was mentally declined. And then it's also important to note that Hur, the investigator, resigned right before this hearing. So it's like he knew this report would not go over well with the DOJ, but he did it anyways, which makes me think that he tried to do the right thing within the confines placed on him. So like that, I don't know. That's my opinion. What do you think?
I agree with you that his hands were probably tied. And I think he honestly believed that the only way he could go with this was just to remain factual in terms of Biden's responses during the investigation. But he also had to tread very carefully with the assessment. And it's like the transcripts don't lie unless they were tampered with, which honestly wouldn't surprise me. But if we're taking them and the investigation at face value, Biden's statements clearly show a supposed loss of memory. Like, personally, I call it lying. But since we can't prove that with these documents, and technically neither can Hur, all he could do was report on what the investigation revealed. And I think that's what he did. I mean, he came out the gate in the beginning of this hearing addressing this issue with Biden's cognitive issues. He didn't try to downplay it, and he explained that his job in the investigation was to determine whether or not Biden had willfully retained these documents with intent. And in order to make that determination, he had to assess Biden's mental state. But he didn't exonerate Biden either. And I don't think he did. He said he didn't. And after listening to everything and reading what I read, I don't think he did. And even in his opening statement, he said, quote, "The evidence and the president himself put his memory squarely at issue. We interviewed the president and asked him about his recorded statement of, 'I just found all the classified stuff downstairs.' He told us he didn't remember saying that to his ghostwriter. He said he didn't remember finding any classified material in his home after his vice presidency. He didn't remember anything about how classified documents about Afghanistan made their way into his garage. My assessment in the report about the relevance of the president's memory was necessary, accurate, and fair. Most importantly, what I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows and what I would expect jurors would perceive and believe. I did not sanitize my explanation, nor did I disparage the president unfairly," end quote. So I agree. I think that what he said was accurate in the context of what could actually be proven during the investigation, which is that Biden clearly has cognitive problems if he continuously stated he didn't remember things. And again, I call bullshit on that. And I think Biden absolutely knew that he had been storing classified documents all over the place at least some point in time when he purposely took them, but they can't prove that now because he's fucking senile and everyone knows it. So frankly, whether on purpose or by accident, this is a genius move by the left to keep him unaccountable. Like, they can't come out and admit that he's senile because that would mean he's unfit for the presidency. So everyone's playing this stupid game of like tiptoeing around the truth, which is that he is senile, yes, but he's also a fucking treasonous liar who's destroying the country. And if Hur said that, he'd end up on the Clinton kill list. And like you said earlier, playing that clip, how many places were these classified documents found? Seven different locations.
And that's
I'm
just
sorry.
what was found. Who knows where
Right.
else?
And I'm sorry, but like, you just don't put classified documents in 7 different locations and forget about them. Like, this was like an Easter egg hunt.
Totally an Easter egg hunt. Like, at this point, was there anywhere that the guy didn't have classified documents? Like, I was dying laughing during that clip because I'm like, the first floor office, the third floor. I'm like, what the hell? And so you've got Biden leaving classified documents everywhere. Then you have his son Hunter leaving laptops everywhere. Apparently, not only did he leave one in the repair shop, he also left one at his therapist's house. And then you have his daughter Ashley leaving her diaries in like rehab centers and halfway houses. It's like, what is up with this family and leaving sensitive shit all over town? Like, it's just unfreaking believable. And that investigator, Hur, like, he was on it. He
Yeah.
was on it. He knew everything in that report, and he didn't let anyone, either Republican or Democrat, try to twist things. Like, he knew exactly what wording he put in that document.
Yeah, I actually loved listening to it because he wasn't backtracking. He wasn't making excuses. He gave very clear statements and he stood by exactly what he put in that investigation.
And he called them out. Like, when the Democrats were like, oh, your report said this, he was like, what page was that on? Because I knew it didn't. And like, he made them look stupid. I was like, dang, you're like, he was on it. So, okay, so there was that investigation. Well, on to another investigation now. So the House Select Committee chairman, Barry Loudermilk, and Republicans ended up launching a re-investigation into January 6th, as there's still unanswered questions. I don't know about you, but I'm fucking tired of hearing about January 6th. But I think it's good that they're looking into this because they want to know still to this day why we don't know who planted the pipe bombs outside of the Republican and Democratic Party headquarters that day. I think that's a fair question. So they launched this reinvestigation. And here we are. There is a lot of evidence that they're finding out, and they've only just started. Okay. So I want to point something out real quick with the whole pipe bomb incident. And like, our government is saying that they don't know who it was, they can't track the person down, whatever. How can they track down every damn person in the vicinity of DC on January 6th?
Yeah.
And knowing there's cameras everywhere, how have they not found the person? Like, it's really looking fishy that maybe that was an inside job. And then on top of that, there's like camera footage missing and like certain angles that are missing from the person that planted the pipe bomb. So like, there's definitely reason to look into this again. Anyhow.
I don't know if you saw this, but I was reading Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying they have the license plate, they have the car, they know who did it, and they're just not releasing the information. And I don't know if
So
that's,
why would that be?
Yeah.
Maybe because it was someone they hired, just like they hire these Antifa people to like try to make January 6th into something that it wasn't, and it never was supposed to be. And so like, yeah, there's a lot of new evidence and testimony that was found that was completely suppressed during the big production of the January 6th committee's investigation in 2022. So you have one of the transcripts showing Trump's White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Anthony Ornato, told the committee that Trump wanted 10,000 troops to protect the Capitol, but was turned down. And Loudermilk says that this testimony was purposefully hidden from the public because it didn't fit their narrative. So Molly Hemingway over at the Federalist reported that Oronato overheard White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows asking the DC Mayor Bowser if she needed National Guard support on January 6th. Oronato overheard Meadows telling Bowser, quote, "The president wants to make sure you have enough. He's willing to ask for 10,000, end quote. Bowser said she was all set. She had around 350 officers, mainly for traffic control. And Oronato recalls Meadows telling him that they put in a request to have troops like on standby at Joint Base Andrews right outside DC. Meadows reportedly pushed acting Secretary of Defense Miller to get troops to the Capitol breach once it happened. And of course, we know that the troops didn't actually show up until 6 p.m., despite Meadows' continuous pleas. And the more surprising evidence that was hidden had to do with the January 6th committee's star witness, Cassidy Hutchinson. Tara, remember that chick that like came out and she's like, "Oh, I heard this wild story from like a Secret Service agent where like Trump supposedly launched at a Secret Service agent like while they were driving and like demanding that they drive him to the Capitol." And this was all hearsay. She said she heard it from like another Secret Service officer or whatever. And the news report says, quote, Oronato testified that the first time he had ever heard the story Hutchinson claims Oronato told her on January 6th was during Hutchinson's public testimony. Hutchinson's testimony was also contradicted by the Secret Service agent who was with President Trump on January 6th. And then the report also said, quote, the driver testified that he specifically refuted the version of events as recounted by Hutchinson. And then according to the report, the driver of the SUV even testified that Trump never grabbed the steering wheel. He said, I didn't see him, lunge to try to get in the front seat at all. So Loudermilk said that the January 6th committee hid this, using it favorably in the final report, but never released the full transcript. And he went on to say, quote, it is unfortunate the select committee succumbed to their political inclinations and chased false narratives instead of providing the important work of a genuine investigation. In my committee's investigation, it's my objective to uncover the facts about January 6th without political bias or spin. My report today is just the beginning. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next.
I'd like to say that I'm hopeful that uncovering the truth and the facts is going to change the reality of what's being done to the American people. But it's like we've seen this time and time again with these House committee investigations, and nothing ever comes of them. Like, even when they prove deception and lies from the left, there's never accountability for anyone, like ever. And it's just continued persecution of innocent people who stand up for freedom. Like, did you know that almost 1,400 people have been arrested and charged by the DOJ for their connections to January 6th?
That's insane.
1,400. Oh, yeah. Well, here's what's more insane. 127 of those people have been accused of using deadly or dangerous weapon or causing serious bodily injury to an officer. And about 500 people have received prison sentences. 500 people. And I want to make some comparisons here, because this was not an insurrection. It was a witch hunt. And like, do you know how many people got prison sentences who were associated with the BLM and Antifa riots in the summer of 2020? 10.
None. 10?
Yeah. 10.
Oh
10 people received prison sentences, and about 70 people were sent to jail, most for less than a year. And these George Floyd protests went on for weeks and involved millions of people. And thousands of them were violent rioters who destroyed public and private property, burning police cars, federal property, taking over police stations and federal landmarks. There were over 8,700 protests nationwide, and 574 of them were declared riots due to the level of violence. And this went on for the entire summer, right? Not for just one day. An entire summer where over 2,000 police officers were assaulted and injured during the first few weeks alone. And 574, quote, protests were officially declared riots. And only a handful of people received prison sentences, while 500 people who attended the January 6th protests, many of whom were arrested just for being there, have been imprisoned. Not sent to jail, imprisoned, because there's a difference between jail and prison. And now the leftist media is in an uproar because Trump is vowing to release these people if he's reelected. And once again, like, the hypocrisy of the left is so fucking infuriating, and I am sick of it. Like, all they do is vilify Trump, vilify American patriots, and now their focus is entirely on him referring to the prisoners as hostages, because they are. They're fucking hostages.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. It's totally a double standard. These are two instances of a complete double standard. But I agree with what you're saying, how, like, okay, it's great that we're getting facts, but nothing's going to come of it. I feel like, I always say it's a theatrical performance, and I feel like each investigation is a separate play, and they're just like putting on a show for us so that we don't actually like hold them accountable for not getting anything done in this country.
Yeah, it's just maddening. And like, I'm going to end this with something else, which is totally unrelated, but at the same time, it's completely related because it's talking about yet another move by the left to destroy America and destroy our traditions. And this one is about watering down our military's identity and pride. So the U.S. Military Academy at West Point announced on Wednesday that they're removing their motto, which has been duty, honor, courage. And they're taking that away from the mission statement and they're replacing it with the term Army values. So why is this important? Because the duty, honor, country motto was made famous by General Douglas MacArthur when he gave a speech at West Point to some cadets in 1962. And this was 2 years before he died. And I was reading in the Washington Times part of the speech. And I just want to read part of it because I think it's very powerful. So he said, quote, "These three hollowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, and what you will be. These are your rallying points to build courage when courage seems to fail, to regain faith when there seems to be little cause for faith, to create hope when hope becomes forlorn," end quote. So I don't know about you, Stephanie, but like, these words make me feel pride in our country and like pride in our military, right? Like,
Yeah.
they do for me.
And if they're just think about this for a second, they're taking out duty because they don't want them to perform their duties, just like the border patrol can't perform their duties. Honor, because they don't want them doing honorable things, and country because it's not about America. Like, they are changing the freaking values of America. So they're going to say Army values because they know they're completely changing all those values.
Yeah, and here's what their new mission statement is going to say. It says, quote, "To build, educate, train, and inspire the Corps of Cadets to be commissioned leaders of character committed to Army values and ready for a lifetime of service to the Army and the nation," end quote. Like, how dull and boring and vague is that? There's no power, there's no force of will, there's no sense of tradition and pride in this new mission statement. And it's like, West Point is supposed to be the premier military academy in the nation, right? But like every other part of the military, it's being softened and destroyed with this progressive, woke DEI agenda. And I was reading, there's a woman, her name is Megan Mobb. She's a West Point graduate and a former Army officer. And she said, quote, "This mission statement is a warning sign that should make everyone sit up and take notice. They're saying the quiet part out loud. West Point is losing its competitive advantage," end quote. And I completely agree. Like, you've got leaders at West Point justifying this change. They're saying it's just a result of routine self-assessment and evolution, and they still fully stand by the duty, honor, country motto. And if that's the case, why would you change it to be something watered down and vague like Army values? Like, I think this speaks to the bigger picture of the Biden admin's constant efforts to get rid of patriotism and erode the importance of American history and traditional values. And it's like, once again, I'm disgusted.
I mean, I think this is bigger than we realize. Like, when you read that, like, commission leaders of character committed to Army values and ready for a lifetime of service to the Army and nation. Why doesn't it say Army and America? Like, do they know, like, do they know like the nation's going to change? It's going to one global order. And like, it just sounds more like you are going to be our slave and do whatever the hell we say, whether you agree with it or not, whether it's against your values or not. Like, that's what I'm reading. And for them to change something that's been around for that long, like, I think there's more to it. And I think this is scary as fuck that
Yeah.
a place like West Point has succumbed to this. So that's crazy. Oh my gosh, you guys, America is like, it's changing. It's changing. And like, you know,
Not in a good way.
if Trump doesn't get in, like, look at how much has changed just in the past 3 years. If he doesn't get in, like, what else is going to happen? Like, we're not going to recognize our country. I already don't recognize it, but there will be nothing left. Like, this is crazy. And I think for anyone listening, if you have people like I have my dad who's like constantly arguing with me because he only watches freaking Lester Holt on the news. If you've got people like that in your life, like this would be a great episode because I think it clearly points out 2 investigations in which there's a total double standard and a lot of shady shit going on. So, you know, share it and like start educating people because we cannot afford to have another Biden or Newsom or whoever they're going to replace Biden with in November. We can't have that. Like we're not going to have a country left. So it's like really important that everyone speaks up and just quit being afraid of what people think. Like this is like your future here. So sorry to leave it on such a serious note, but there's serious things happening in our world right now. And we'll try to do another fun conspiracy episode to like balance it out. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you back here next time. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.